Evan Brooks walked across the wide valley with slow steps, feeling the dry wind move across the grass. The world around him was bright and wild. Sharp mountains stood far in the distance, their peaks covered with smoke like clouds. This land belonged to dragons, and every story that humans told about these creatures said the same thing. Dragons did not like strangers. Still, Evan came here alone. He carried only a small pack, a scanner, and a simple map. His mission was peaceful. Humans and dragons had lived on separate worlds for generations, never close enough to understand each other. Now, both sides wanted to try something new. Evan was sent to learn the land, understand the dragons, and show that humans could be trusted. He stopped near a ridge and knelt to examine a strange red plant growing between two rocks. As he took notes, he heard a low rumble behind him. The ground shook slightly. Evan did not move fast. Instead, he turned his head slowly. Two dragons landed a short distance away. Their wings were large, strong, and red like glowing embers. Their scales shined under the sun. They were tall enough that Evan had to tilt his head far back to see their faces. Both dragons stared at him with cold interest. One of them stepped closer. His voice sounded like rolling thunder. He said that humans were weak. He said Evan should not be here. He said humans did not belong anywhere near dragon territory. Evan kept his hands down and stayed calm. He explained that he came to study the land and help build understanding between their two species. He said he meant no harm. The dragons did not seem impressed. The second dragon laughed, a deep sound that shook dust from the rocks. He told Evan that humans were fragile creatures. Their bodies were small, their skin thin, their bones weak. He said a human could not survive long in land shaped by dragons. Evan listened quietly. He did not argue. He simply said that he only wished to do his work and would stay out of their way. Something in his voice made the dragons pause. They spoke to each other in low growls, their tails sweeping dust across the ground. At last, the first dragon said Evan could stay, but only because they found him amusing. They warned him that they would not protect him if anything happened. They told him the land was dangerous and far too harsh for a human. Evan thanked them and continued walking. For the next few hours, he moved along the lower edge of the mountains, taking samples of soil and recording strange sounds that echoed from deeper caves. He worked with quiet focus, even when shadows of dragons passed overhead. Later in the day, Evan reached a small stream and sat down to rest. As he began checking his notes, he noticed movement on the opposite side of the water. A small dragon, no bigger than a horse, watched him with bright golden eyes. Her scales were softer and lighter than the adults. She was young, still learning, still growing. She stared at him with curiosity instead of anger. Evan slowly raised a hand in greeting, careful not to move too fast. The young dragon tilted her head, studying him like a puzzle. She stepped closer to the water and sniffed the air. Evan smiled softly. He told her his name, speaking in a calm and steady tone. But before the young dragon could come closer, a sharp roar shook the valley. One of the adult dragons swooped down, landing between her and Evan. Dust rose in a thick cloud. The adult growled at the young dragon and pushed her away with a firm wing. Then he turned and glared at Evan. He told Evan to stay away from their young. He warned him again that humans were weak. He said that dragons did not want humans near their families. Evan kept his voice steady. He explained that he had no ill intentions. He simply wanted to learn and help. The dragon seemed annoyed. He spread his wings and flew off with the young dragon close behind him. The valley became quiet again. Evan looked around, feeling the weight of the moment. The dragons clearly did not trust him. They believed humans were fragile, foolish, and powerless. They thought he could not survive even a single day in their land. But Evan did not give up. He continued walking toward the deeper mountains, determined to finish his mission. The ground beneath him felt warm. The air carried the faint smell of ash. Dragons lived here, hunted here, raised their young here. Everything in this place was shaped by fire and strength. Evan knew he could not match dragon strength. He was only human, but he also knew something the dragons did not understand. Human strength was not always in the body. It was in the heart. As the sun dropped behind the mountains, Evan made a small camp near a tall rock formation. He cooked a simple meal and checked his maps again. In the distance, he heard dragons roaring to each other, their voices echoing like storms. Even from far away, he could tell that they still did not believe in him. They called him weak. But this land was about to change their minds forever. Evan Brooks woke early the next morning. A thin gray light spread slowly across the valley, and the cool air carried the smell of smoke from dragon dens hidden deeper in the mountains. Evan rolled up his blanket, packed his gear, and took a slow breath. Today he planned to study the shifting ground near the cliffs, an area that seemed unstable on his scanner the previous evening. He walked carefully, following a line of small cracks in the soil. The earth here felt different, almost restless. Every few steps, the ground hummed as if something beneath it was moving. Evan stopped several times to scan the area. The readings were strange. Pressure pockets, heat spikes, micro-vibrations. Something was off. He noted everything in his device, marking spots that might become dangerous. Humans had seen similar patterns on their own worlds. When the ground behaved like this, it meant change was coming. Sometimes slow, sometimes sudden. Either way, it was never harmless. As Evan worked, he felt eyes watching him. He turned. The young dragon from the stream stood a few yards away. Her scales glowed faint orange in the morning light. She looked cautious but curious. Evan remembered how the adult dragon had pushed her away yesterday. Yet here she was again. Evan kept his movements slow and gentle. He greeted her softly, telling her he meant no harm. She blinked, then walked a little closer. Her claws clicked against the stone, and her tail swayed like a curious cat. Her golden eyes studied his tools, his hands, even the way he breathed. Evan knelt and held out a small metal sensor for her to inspect. The young dragon sniffed it, then tapped it lightly with her nose. A tiny beep sounded, and she jumped back in surprise. Evan laughed softly but not in a mocking way. He explained what the device did, speaking as if she could understand every word. For a moment it felt peaceful. Then a sharp growl rolled across the rocks. 2 adult dragons landed nearby, their wings sending gusts of hot wind across the ground. Evan shielded his face from the dust as they stomped toward him. One of them, the same dragon who had warned him yesterday, stepped between Evan and the young dragon. He shouted at her, telling her to stay away from the human. He called Evan a fragile creature who could break from a single swipe of a dragon's tail. The young dragon looked down, folding her wings tightly in shame. Evan spoke calmly. He explained that he was only studying the ground and meant no danger to anyone. He said the young dragon was not in trouble. The adult dragons did not care. They told him humans were not strong enough to handle dragonlands. They said Evan should leave and return to his people before he died from something as simple as falling rocks or sudden firestorms. Evan did not leave. He showed them his scanner and said something dangerous was building under the earth. He pointed to the cracks and the heat marks. He warned them to move their nurseries away from this zone. The dragons stared at him. Then they laughed. They said humans always worried too much. They said humans feared the earth, feared the sky, feared everything. Dragons did not fear shifting ground. Dragons did not run from danger. Evan tried again. He explained that danger could come fast, that the earth sometimes broke open without warning, that even dragons could be hurt. They ignored him entirely. The adult dragon led the young one away, leaving Evan alone again. Their wings lifted dust clouds as they flew back toward the mountains. Evan watched them go, his worry growing. They didn't believe him. They didn't trust his warnings. And they didn't think humans had anything useful to offer. But he had seen enough worlds to know what the land was telling him. Something big was coming. Evan continued his survey, moving deeper into the unstable region. The ground felt warmer under his boots. At times he heard faint cracks from the rocks. Once, he felt a low tremor shake through the earth like a slow heartbeat. By midday, the heat grew stronger. Thin streams of steam rose from new cracks in the soil. Evan crouched beside one and waved his scanner over it. The device buzzed with a fast alarm. Pressure rising. Heat rising. movement increasing. He took a step back. If this continued, the mountain could break open. And if the dragons kept their young in their deep nursery caverns, disaster could strike. Evan packed his things quickly and headed toward the Emberclaw clan's main path. He needed to warn them again, even if they ignored him. Maybe if he shared clearer readings or showed them the danger firsthand, they would listen. But halfway up the ridge, a shadow fell across him. A dragon, a different one this time with deep blue scales, landed in front of him. She lowered her head and looked at him with an expression Evan couldn't read. She asked why a human was in their inner territory. She said humans usually feared dragons, yet Evan walked alone, doing strange work. Evan explained again who he was and what he was trying to do. He showed her the scanner. She watched the moving spikes on the screen, but her eyes narrowed. She said dragons did not need humans to tell them how to understand their own land. Evan sighed quietly. He felt the weight of their pride, their stubbornness. He knew they did not understand human intentions. They only saw a small being wandering their mountain and believed he was too weak to matter. Before leaving, the blue-scaled dragon told him something important. The hatchlings were being moved deeper into their main nursery cavern today, where it was warm and quiet. Evan's heart sank. Deeper was the worst place to be. The ground shook again, stronger this time, knocking small stones loose from the cliffs. Evan looked at the mountain with worry. The dragon's pride kept them blind. But soon, the earth would force them to see the truth. As the sun dipped low in the sky, Evan stood alone on a high ridge, scanning the trembling land. He knew danger was coming, and he knew the dragons would not believe him until it was far too late. The sun rose red the next morning, glowing through thin layers of drifting ash. Evan Brooks stood at the edge of a high ridge, staring toward the Emberclaw clan's main mountain. His scanner beeped again and again, the alerts growing faster. The ground beneath him trembled in short pulses, like a warning heartbeat before something terrible. He tightened his pack straps and began moving quickly down the slope. Dust rolled under his boots as he hurried toward the dragon's central territory. He had to warn them again. He had to try. But before he reached the lower path, the earth roared. A violent quake threw him off balance. Rocks cracked open like splitting wood. Birds took off in panic swarms. The ground lifted once, then slammed downward with a force that knocked Evan to his knees. He covered his head as stones fell around him. The mountain groaned. A deep, hollow sound rolled out across the valley. Evan's heart dropped. He looked up and saw dust clouds blasting out of the dragon's nursery cavern entrance. The opening, normally wide and glowing with warm firelight, was now half collapsed. Thick smoke rolled upward as smaller rocks continued to fall. "No," Evan whispered. He sprinted. Dragons from all over the valley were already gathering. Wings thundered in the air as they flew down in waves. Their roars shook the sky. Evan reached the base of the mountain and forced his way through the chaos. Adult dragons shouted orders, their voices filled with panic. Some tried to claw away the fallen rocks, but the narrow entrance made it impossible. Their large bodies couldn't fit inside. Their claws only knocked more stones loose. A dragon with dark golden scales shouted that the hatchlings were still inside. Another tried to push her way through the rubble but got stuck. She backed out fast, trembling with fear and frustration. Evan climbed over small stones and broken dirt. The heat around the collapsed entrance burned his skin. He coughed from the dust but kept moving until he reached the nearest dragon. "What happened?" he asked, though he already knew. "The mountain shifted," the dragon growled. "The tunnels are falling. The young are trapped." Dragons kept shouting. Some roared at the sky as if the earth had betrayed them. Others tried to dig again, but the space was far too small. Every time they moved a stone, another fell. A young dragon, the same one who had watched Evan the day before, was crying out in panic. She tried to squeeze into the hole, but her mother pulled her back. Evan looked at the tiny opening. Cracked, unstable, full of dust. It was barely big enough for him. He turned to the nearest dragon. "I can go inside." The dragon stared at him with disbelief. "A human cannot survive in those tunnels. They are too hot." Too unstable. Too dangerous. Evan shook his head. You can't fit. I can. Dragons nearby growled, some angrily, some in confusion. One shouted that the human would die within minutes. Another argued that letting a human into their sacred nursery was madness. Evan's voice stayed steady. Your young don't have minutes. The ground shook again. Dust fell from the mountain's face. Dragons roared in alarm. Evan stepped closer to the opening, ignoring the heat on his skin. He dropped to his knees and looked into the dark, broken tunnel. He could hear faint cries. The hatchlings were alive. He turned back to the dragons. If I don't go, they will die. Let me help. The Emberclaw matriarch, a massive dragon with glowing red scales, landed hard in front of the entrance. Her wings folded slowly, and her eyes burned with fear and rage. She looked down at Evan, studying him as if seeing him for the first time. You are weak, she growled. You are small. You cannot survive the fire tunnels. Evan met her gaze without flinching. Maybe, but I can try, and trying is better than doing nothing. The young dragon's cries echoed again from inside the collapsed cavern. The matriarch's wings twitched. Silence fell over the gathered dragons. The matriarch lowered her head until her breath warmed the air around Evan. Why would a human risk their life for dragon young? Evan answered simply, because they need someone. The matriarch closed her eyes for a long moment. Then she stepped back. Go, she commanded. Save them if you can. Evan wasted no time. He pulled a small light from his pack, tied a cloth around his mouth, and crawled into the tight opening. Sharp stones scraped his arms. The heat inside felt like breathing near a furnace. He crawled deeper. Behind him, dragons held their breath. Inside the collapsing tunnels, dust filled the air. Echoes of cracking rock shook the narrow passage. Evan pressed forward, forced to squeeze sideways at times. His shoulders brushed burning stone. His clothes tore on jagged walls. He heard the hatchlings again, closer now. The faint, fearful cry. Hold on, Evan called, his voice echoing ahead. He crawled around a sharp bend, then dropped into a wider chamber where sunlight no longer reached. Smoke and heat swirled in the air. Broken stones littered the floor. For dragons young huddled together near a collapsed wall. They were trembling. Evan's chest clenched. He moved quickly toward them, feeling the ground shift beneath his feet. The ceiling creaked dangerously. One hatchling cried out again. Evan knelt beside them, speaking softly. It's okay. I'm here to help. I'm going to get you out. Another quake rolled through the mountain. The ceiling dropped a shower of dust. Evan looked back at the narrow tunnel. Time was almost gone, and the dragons outside still thought he was too weak. They had no idea what a single determined human could do. Evan Brooks took a slow breath, trying to steady his shaking hands. The chamber around him felt alive with danger. The heat was rising fast, thick enough to sting his eyes and burn his throat. Fine dust floated through the air like drifting ash. Every few seconds, another small rumble moved through the stone floor, warning him that the mountain was still shifting. The 4 dragon hatchlings dragged their tails close to their small bodies. Their scales were brighter than the adults, glowing softly with warm colors. They were afraid, and their wings trembled with each new vibration. Evan knelt beside them. His voice stayed calm, even though fear pressed against his chest. He told them they would be fine. He told them they were not alone. One of the hatchlings leaned toward him, sniffing his sleeve. Another hid behind the others, shaking. Evan reached out gently and touched the ground near them so they could sense his presence without fear. Above them, another piece of the ceiling cracked. Stones fell, bouncing off the floor. The hatchlings cried out. Evan knew he had no time to waste. He pointed toward the narrow tunnel he had crawled through. It was the only way out. He whispered, telling them to follow him. Slowly, the largest hatchling stepped forward. The others followed, staying tight together. Their small claws scratched the stone softly. Evan moved first. The tunnel ahead was dark and tight. He could feel heat rising from deeper fractures. The walls felt unstable beneath his hands. He checked his light and crawled into the passage. Behind him, the hatchlings followed, their breathing quick and scared. The ground trembled again. Dust fell on his back like warm snow. Evan kept moving. He crawled through the curve in the tunnel. His shoulders scraped the rough stone. His knees burned from the uneven floor. But he did not stop. He focused on the small sounds behind him, the tiny claws, the soft cries, and he pushed forward. Halfway through, the tunnel narrowed even more. Evan felt the space pressing against his sides. He turned to check the hatchlings. They struggled. The space was tight for them too. One hatchling's wing caught on a jagged rock. Cried out in pain. Evan backed up as far as he could and reached for the stuck wing. Dust filled the air as he worked to free it. He told the hatchling to stay calm. He pulled gently, using slow movements so he wouldn't injure it. With a sharp twist, the wing came free. The hatchling shook with relief. But the movement triggered another tremor. The tunnel shook hard. Stones dropped around them. A loud crack echoed forward. Evan froze as a section of the passage ahead collapsed, blocking the way. The hatchlings whimpered. Evan's stomach tightened. The exit was gone. He turned quickly and examined the broken wall. The collapse wasn't complete. There was still a small gap between the fallen rocks. Not enough for a dragon to pass through, but maybe enough for him. He pushed against one of the smaller rocks. It shifted a little. Heat burst through the gap, blowing hot air against his face. Evan coughed but kept working. He reached into his pack and pulled out a small metal cutter, a basic tool humans used for field repairs. He pressed the glowing blade against the edge of a stone. The metal hissed on contact. The hatchlings watched him, their bodies pressed together. Evan worked fast, slicing through the weaker parts of the rocks. He cleared one stone, then another. His arms ached. Sweat rolled down his face. The air felt heavy, almost too hot to breathe. But the gap grew wider, just enough. He called to the hatchlings again and began to squeeze through the opening. The stone scraped his back and shoulders, tearing his shirt. He felt heat blast from the other side, but he kept pushing. When he finally slipped through, he reached back and guided the hatchlings one by one. They crawled through the space with frightened sounds, but they made it. On the other side, the tunnel grew taller. Evan stood slowly, stretching his cramped legs. The ground here was more stable, but the air was hotter. A faint glow pulsed through cracks in the stone. He realized they were getting close to one of the natural heat vents the dragons used. It wasn't dangerous, but with the mountain shifting, it could become deadly if it ruptured. He told the hatchlings to stay close. They followed him deeper, past broken stones and glowing cracks. Evan's heart pounded with each step. He could only hope the tunnel still connected to the main exit. Finally, he reached a fork in the passage. One side led upward, toward fresher air. He took it. The path grew steeper. Evan climbed on hands and feet at times. His muscles burned. The hatchlings struggled on the slope, but he helped them by guiding them with gentle pushes. Another rumble shook the mountain. A roar echoed faintly from the other side of the rock. Dragons. Adults. Calling out. The hatchlings lifted their heads. Evan's spirit pushed forward. He climbed faster, the air shifting from burning to warm, then to cool. A thin draft touched his face. Light. He saw it. A faint beam shining through a small opening far above. Hope surged in his chest. He told the hatchlings they were almost out. He pushed up the last stretch, hands slipping on loose stones. The hatchlings climbed behind him, their claws scraping. At the top, a thin crack in the rock let in sunlight. Evan pulled at the stones around it. They moved easily this time, sliding free with sharp scrapes. He widened the gap until it was just big enough. Warm air rushed in. Outside, dragons roared again. Louder now. Evan looked back at the hatchlings and nodded. They climbed out one by one, tumbling onto the open ledge. When Evan crawled out last, he collapsed onto the cool rock, gasping. The dragons outside stared in shock. The weak human had saved their young. The mountains were quiet when dawn arrived, but the quiet carried a sharp tension under it. Noah felt it the moment he stepped out of the cave that the dragons had given him as a resting place. He could sense it in the cold air, in the slow shifting of shadows across the high ridges, in the way even the wind seemed to hold its breath. The dragons were speaking in low voices far above him, and he knew they were talking about what had happened the previous night. He had saved the young dragon, and that act alone had changed something in the valley. The dragons did not look at him the same way anymore. Before, they had seen him as a small and weak creature, a fragile thing wandering into a land meant for giants. Now they watched him with a different look, a softer one, almost like respect, but still mixed with confusion. They were not used to humans doing brave things for them. Noah stretched his arms and breathed in the cold air. The sunlight touched the edge of the cliffs and lit the stone in gold. He felt tired, but he felt something else too, a purpose rising inside him. He did not know why fate had brought him here, but he knew he could not turn away from it anymore. The dragons needed help, and he had seen fear in their eyes. Something dangerous was coming. He stepped forward as a large shadow passed over him. It was Lyra, the dragon who had first carried him into their territory. She landed softly, folding her wings close to her body. She bent her head toward him. "Come with me," she said. Her voice was steady, but her eyes told him she was troubled. Noah followed her along a narrow path that curved against the mountain walls. The stone beneath his feet was rough, and from the path he could see valleys stretching far below, covered in morning mist. The air carried the faint scent of smoke and something metallic. Lyra walked beside him slowly, giving him time to keep up. "The elders want to see you," she said. He looked up at her. "Is it because of what happened last night?" She hesitated. "Yes, and also because of something else." The youngling said something strange. Something the elders cannot ignore. Noah did not ask more. He knew he would hear it soon enough. They kept walking until the path opened into a wide platform of stone, a natural circle carved out by time and wind. There, waiting for them, were 4 dragons larger than any he had seen before. Their scales shimmered like deep metal, and their eyes were old, full of memories and storms. Lyra lowered her head in respect before stepping back. Noah stood alone in the center as the elders watched him. Finally, the largest of them, a dragon with silver lines running through his black scales, spoke. "Human, you have done something no dragon expected. You saved the life of our young. For that, we owe you thanks." Noah nodded quietly. "I only did what anyone should do." "No," another elder said, her voice deeper. "Most humans run from us. Most think only of their own fear. You did not." She lowered her head slightly. "That matters." There was a brief silence. Then the first elder spoke again. "The youngling you saved said he saw something in you. Something that does not belong to humans." Noah frowned. "What do you mean?" "He said your hands glowed when you touched him," the elder continued. "He said the burning inside him faded because of your touch. Tell us, human, how did you heal him?" Noah felt his heart jump. He remembered the moment, the heat of the young dragon's wound, the panic in his chest, the strange pulse that had moved through his arms. He had been too focused on saving the dragon to think about what he was feeling. "I don't know," he said. "I've never done anything like that before." "The light was real," the silver-scaled elder said. "We felt it in the air. Dragons can sense energy the way humans sense warmth. Whatever you did, it was powerful. More powerful than any simple human ability." Lyra stepped forward a little. "I saw something too," she said softly. "When you touched the youngling, the flames around him calmed. Your presence changed the air." Noah looked down at his hands. They looked normal. They felt normal. "I don't understand any of this," he said. "I came here by accident. I didn't come to be anything special." "Yet you are," the elder said. "And that means the threat we face may be tied to you more than we thought." Noah lifted his eyes. "What threat?" The dragons exchanged a look that carried weight. The silver elder stepped forward. "An ancient enemy has returned," he said. "A creature that hunts dragons. A creature that feeds on our fire. We have seen signs of it near our borders. The youngling was attacked by one of its scouts." Noah felt a chill run through him. What does this have to do with me? We do not know, the elder said. But your healing, your presence, the timing of your arrival, these things are not chance. Lyra lowered her head toward him. We need your help, Noah. Whatever is inside you may be the only thing that can save us. Noah felt the air grow still around him. He knew the truth in their voices. He knew he could not walk away. He took a deep breath. Tell me what you need me to do, he said. Evan Brooks stood among the dragons, feeling the weight of their eyes on him. Their large heads bent slightly as they regarded him with awe he had never seen before. Even the matriarch, who had once called him weak, now seemed to study him in silence. The events of the past nights had changed everything. The young dragons that he had saved now circled him carefully, their wings fluttering softly, a sign of both curiosity and trust. Lyra, the dragon who had guided him to the elders, stayed close, her golden eyes observing his every movement. Evan felt exhausted from his efforts in the tunnels, but he also felt a strange strength growing inside him. There was a bond forming, quiet and steady, between him and the dragons, one that he could not fully explain. The matriarch spoke first, her voice deep and commanding. You have shown courage beyond any human we have seen. Not only did you save our young, but you also faced dangers that would challenge even the strongest of dragons. Evan nodded, keeping his voice calm. I only did what needed to be done. They were in danger. Someone had to act. The dragons murmured among themselves, a mix of agreement and disbelief. No human had ever earned such recognition. They had always considered humans fragile, incapable of true heroism. But Evan had proved them wrong. The matriarch lowered her massive head. From this day forward, no dragon shall call humans weak. Your actions have shown that strength is not always measured by size or firepower. Sometimes, it is measured by heart and courage. Evan felt a warmth in his chest. He had come here to study the land and learn from the dragons, but in the process, he had earned their respect. It was a strange, humbling feeling. Lyra stepped forward. The younglings are safe because of you, but the tunnels are still unstable. We need to work together to ensure they remain protected. Evan agreed. He suggested ways to reinforce the tunnels using human tools and techniques he had used back on his world. The dragons listened carefully, their expressions a mix of curiosity and cautious optimism. Though their bodies were built for strength, their minds had not considered the possibilities a human mind could offer. Over the following hours, Evan led the dragons in stabilizing the damaged tunnels. He showed them how to use rocks and supports to prevent further collapses, teaching them step by step. Dragons, despite their power, struggled with fine adjustments that humans could manage with precision. Lyra and the younglings assisted, moving debris and keeping watch over the fragile structures. Evan guided them patiently, praising their efforts and showing them how teamwork could achieve more than individual strength alone. As the day turned into evening, the tunnels were reinforced. The young dragons were safe, and the elders nodded in approval. They had learned something important. Humans, though smaller and physically weaker, brought different kinds of strength that could complement their own. The matriarch approached Evan once more. You have done more than save our young. You have opened our eyes to the value of humans. We will remember this day, and we will honor your courage in the future. Evan smiled, feeling a sense of accomplishment that went beyond personal pride. He had acted out of compassion and determination, and in doing so, he had bridged a gap between species that had existed for generations. That night, the dragons held a quiet gathering. They did not roar or breathe fire in celebration. Instead, they shared stories of bravery and courage, and Evan listened, feeling more a part of their world than he ever had before. Lyra perched beside him, her head close to his shoulder. You are different, she said softly. You are a human, but you carry the heart of a dragon. Evan chuckled. I'm just a human trying to do what's right. But that is what makes you strong, she replied. The galaxy has many kinds of strength, and you have shown us one we had never seen before. Evan looked around at the dragons, at their massive wings folded in repose, their eyes bright with recognition and trust. He realized that he had changed them as much as they had changed him. Mutual respect had been built through action, courage, and empathy. In the stillness of the evening, Evan felt a quiet pride. He had started as an outsider, a stranger in dragon territory, laughed at and called weak. Now he stood among them as a hero, a bridge between two species, a symbol that strength came in many forms. As the stars began to appear above the mountain peaks, Evan knew that this was only the beginning. Dragons and humans could learn from each other, could protect each other, and together, they could face challenges that no single species could endure alone. And for the first time, Evan felt a deep certainty that humans were no longer fragile outsiders in a world of dragons. They were part of the story, part of the future, and part of a bond that could not easily be broken. The following days passed with a rhythm that Evan had never experienced. Each morning, he would rise before dawn, the sky painted with faint orange light, and move among the dragons to continue repairs and improvements to their nursery tunnels. The adults watched him work, sometimes offering guidance, sometimes observing silently. They had grown to trust him, though their pride made it hard to show openly. Lyra stayed close as his companion. She guided the younglings safely, teaching them how to explore the newly stabilized sections of the tunnels without danger. Evan spoke to her in low tones, explaining simple human concepts about engineering and balance. She listened intently, her head tilted, absorbing his words with the curiosity of youth but the wisdom of age. Word of his bravery had spread among the other dragon clans in the region. By midweek, several dragons arrived from distant mountains, their wings creating gusts that rolled clouds over the valley. They came not with hostility but with caution and curiosity. The tales of a human who had saved an entire clutch of hatchlings had traveled faster than Evan could imagine. He stood before the visiting clans with the Emberclaw elders at his side. The dragon's eyes, massive and shimmering, followed every motion he made. Despite their intimidating presence, Evan felt no fear. He understood them enough to respect their strength, and they had begun to understand him enough to respect his courage. One elder stepped forward, her scales glinting like molten silver in the morning sun. She regarded Evan carefully. The humans we have seen are small and fragile. Yet this human has faced fire and stone and lived. He has saved our young. Why do you persist among us? Evan straightened. I came to learn from you, to understand your world. But when I saw the young in danger, I had to act. It wasn't about bravery. It was about helping. A hush fell over the gathered dragons. It was rare for a human to speak with such clarity among them. The visiting elder looked to her companions and then to the Emberclaw matriarch. The matriarch lowered her head, signaling approval. Your actions are worthy of respect, she said, her deep voice echoing across the valley. You have shown us that strength is not always measured by size or fire. It is measured by courage and will. Evan felt the dragon's gazes shift from wary to contemplative. He realized that this was more than recognition. It was a beginning. He had opened a path for humans to be seen differently, not as fragile creatures, but as allies capable of action and insight. Later, as he worked to teach the dragons how to reinforce tunnels using techniques from human engineering, he noticed a subtle change. The dragons began to see him not just as a helper but as a teacher. They asked questions, repeated instructions, and adapted his methods to their massive bodies. Even the younglings began experimenting, climbing with newfound confidence, guided by Evan's words and presence. Evan felt a sense of fulfillment he had never known. Each successful adjustment, each small victory in stabilizing a tunnel, strengthened the bond between human and dragon. They began to trust him in ways that made his work easier, and he learned from them in ways no human manual could teach. One afternoon, as sunlight glinted off the dragon's scales like liquid metal, Lyra nudged him gently. She had something to show. They climbed to a higher ridge where the valley stretched wide, the other clans circling below. Lyra pointed toward the horizon. There, faintly visible, were signs of other dragon territories that had received the tales of Evan's deeds. They approached not with aggression, but with curiosity, some circling above, some landing cautiously. Your story has reached them, Lyra said. Humans are no longer unknown to them, and they will not see us the same way again. Evan looked out over the valley, feeling the magnitude of the moment. His actions had bridged a gap. He had done more than save the young. He had begun a cultural exchange, an understanding that could shift the balance between species. The dragons gathered around him, their eyes reflecting respect and cautious optimism. He realized that their world, once distant and forbidding, was opening to him, just as his world had opened to them. That evening, the Emberclaw elders and visiting clan leaders held a quiet council. Evan watched from nearby, understanding their gestures and tones. They discussed the potential of alliances, of shared knowledge, and the mutual benefits of cooperation. It was extraordinary to witness. Lyra perched beside him, wings folded, golden eyes watching the discussions. You have changed everything, she whispered. Evan shook his head slightly. No, we've changed together. Humans and dragons. Both of us. As the stars began to appear over the mountain peaks, Evan felt a calm certainty. The bridges he had built were only the beginning. The galaxy would soon learn that humans were not merely fragile outsiders. They were allies, problem solvers, and partners in a universe that valued courage above all else. And as he watched the dragons interact, the elders nodding, the younglings exploring freely, Evan knew that this was just the first step toward a future where humans and dragons faced the universe side by side. The morning was crisp and clear, with sunlight streaming over the mountain peaks. Evan Brooks stood at the edge of the valley, looking down at the dragons gathered below. The air smelled of fire, stone, and earth, the familiar scent of the Emberclaw territory. Today felt different. There was a sense of anticipation, a quiet energy vibrating in the air. Dragons from nearby clans had arrived in numbers, their wings casting shadows across the valley floor. They hovered, circled, and landed cautiously, their eyes fixed on Evan. Word of his bravery had traveled quickly, and the gathering was unprecedented. Humans had never been seen in such a position of respect in Dragonlands before. Lyra landed beside him, her golden eyes bright. She nudged him gently. They have come to see you to understand what a human can do. Today, your actions will mark history. Evan took a deep breath. He had never sought recognition, only to help. But now, he realized that what he had done had more significance than he had imagined. His courage had not only saved lives, but had begun to change centuries of misunderstanding. The matriarch stepped forward, her massive wings folding behind her. Her scales shimmered in the morning light, and her eyes were calm but commanding. She raised her head to address the gathering. Dragons of every clan, she began, her voice carrying across the valley. We have witnessed something remarkable. This human, whom we once called weak, has shown courage beyond our understanding. He has entered the collapsing tunnels, faced fire and stone, and saved our young. He has proven that strength is not only measured by size or power but by heart, determination, and will. A murmur of agreement spread among the dragons. Even the visiting clans, wary at first, now looked at Evan with respect. Some lowered their heads in a gesture of acknowledgement. Others made soft, approving roars. Evan stepped forward. His voice was steady, carrying across the valley. I am no warrior of dragons, no master of fire or flight. I am only human, and I act as humans do, to help when it is needed, to protect those who cannot protect themselves. That is all strength I claim. Silence followed, thick and profound. Then the younglings he had saved emerged from among the adults, their small wings fluttering. They circled him once and landed gently at his feet, chirping softly. The gesture was innocent but powerful. Even dragons understood symbols. The matriarch lowered her head, touching her snout lightly to Evan's shoulder in a sign of trust and gratitude. From this day forth, humans shall be seen differently in our lands. They shall be recognized for their courage, their wisdom, and their ability to act where others might falter. You have opened the eyes of dragons, Evan Brooks. You are a bridge between our worlds. Evan felt a warmth spread through him. The fear, the doubt, and the exhaustion of the past days melted away. He had started as a stranger, laughed at and dismissed as weak. Now he stood at the center of dragon territory as a hero, respected and trusted. He had not sought this, but he accepted it with humility. The dragons roared in unison, a sound that shook the valley and echoed into the far mountains. It was not a sound of aggression, but of celebration and recognition. The echo carried a message that would reach every dragon in the region. Humans were not weak. They were capable. They were allies. Lyra perched on his shoulder briefly, nuzzling him gently. "You have done more than save lives," she said softly. "You have changed hearts and minds. You have shown us that courage knows no species." Evan smiled. "I only did what needed to be done. The dragons are brave, strong, and wise. I only lent what little help I could." The matriarch's eyes gleamed. "It is enough. It has changed everything. Let the clans remember this day, and let humans and dragons walk forward together, learning, protecting, and growing stronger." As the sun climbed higher, casting golden light across the valley, Evan looked at the dragons around him. The younglings, safe and playful. The adults, calm but proud. The visiting clans, respectful and intrigued. He understood that this moment was the beginning of something larger than himself. He had come to dragon lands as a stranger. He had been called weak, dismissed, underestimated. But through courage, compassion, and determination, he had not only saved lives but had earned a place in dragon history. Evan Brooks took a deep breath of the mountain air, feeling the weight and the promise of the future. Humans and dragons, once separated by fear and misunderstanding, now had a chance to walk a shared path. The world had changed, and he had been a part of that change. The dragons lifted into the sky, circling in majestic formations, their roars echoing like thunder across the peaks. Evan watched them, a quiet smile on his face. They had called him weak, but now they saw the truth. Strength is not only in the fire one breathes or the wings one spreads. True strength is in the courage to act, to protect, and to build bridges where none existed before. And in that moment, standing among dragons, Evan Brooks knew he had done exactly that.